50 books by the time I'm 50. I mean, that should be pretty easy. I mean, I'm not going to be 50 until... Oh, no. No, 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 no. Hello and welcome to The Book Thing. My name is Mark and this is a video I have been planning for quite some time. I've been planning this back since I saw Bonnie Nicole do her video on the 40 books that she wanted to read before she's 40. And I thought that was such a cool idea. So I took inspiration from Bonnie Nicole's video to do this. Taking inspiration from is just a nice way of saying stole. I stole this. It's nicked. This is a stolen idea. It's her idea and this is plagiarism. Unfortunately, 40 is well and truly in my rearview mirror. So I am going to have to try and do something a little more ambitious and go for the 50 books that I intend to read before I'm 50. Bonnie Nicole's video was released ages ago and I'm going to put a link to it down below. But the reason it's taken me so long to get here is it took me quite a while to work out what the 50 books were going to be. I started to compile a list of books that I feel I should read by the time I'm 50, and that started to knock on the door of 200 books. So I started to narrow that down. I imposed the rule on myself that these would be books that I already physically had. To narrow it down a bit more, I decided to restrict it to one book per author. There is an exception on that, but I will get onto that later. And that had the knock-on effect of not having any full series on this list as well, which is kind of a good thing. And I decided to almost restrict myself there as well. So any series that I'd already started, putting books 2 or 3 in there felt like a bit of a cheat in getting these books that I wanted to read before I was 50. So the only time there are some series mentioned is when the book I'm reading is either the very first part of that series or stands up on its own merits. As I'd already committed to reading the 10 hardest books that I haven't read from that previous video of mine, I decided to include those in that list to help make the decisions a little bit easier. And that's why we also get one author who's got 2 entries on here, because in that list there was one author who had 2 entries on it as well. The other thing I've tried to do is prioritize authors that I've never read anything from before. So in my long list, I had several works by Charles Dickens, but I have read some Dickens in the past, so I made an effort to try and include authors that I haven't read instead. So then it was just a question of working through my bookshelf and whittling it down to 40 books that I really felt I should read by the time I'm 50. As you'd expect with an aspirational list like this, it does skew fairly heavily towards classics and literary fiction, but I did make sure that there was a good chunk of genre stuff in there that I wanted to read as well. And in those instances, they tended to be classics of the genres. So I have my list. And unless I split this in 2, which I very well may do, this is going to be a long one. So get yourself a cup of tea or a beer or a glass of wine. And here are the 50 books that I intend to read between now and my 50th birthday in just over 2.5 years. So I'm going to break them down into categories and start with classics. And I'm going to define classics as anything written before 1955. I know there are definitions of classics which would define anything as classic from anything from 30 years old. I, for my own vanity, am not accepting that definition. 70 years old is plenty, thanks very much. So this section kind of goes from about 1555 to 1955, and I'm going to do them chronologically in order of when they were first published. And the earliest story on the list is Monkey King, Journey to the West by Wu Cheng-en. I mean, this is a new translation of it, so fairly recently published, but the original story, it dates back to, I think, about 1570, something like that. It's an old Chinese story and tells the tale of this mischievous Monkey King and how he accompanies a Buddhist monk on a mission to retrieve some scrolls, and there are all sorts of magical adventures on it. It has been the inspiration for huge numbers of TV programs and animes and films and all that sort of thing, and I've never read any version of it at all. We jump ahead to 1605 to what is widely considered to be one of the first examples of the modern Western novel, and that is Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. This is the story of the old man who reads a whole load of stories about knights and their valiant deeds and decides he's going to become a knight himself. He starts to have these adventures where his confused and addle mind mistakes windmills for giants and all that other stuff. I'm sure there's a lot more than windmills and giants in this monster volume, but that's kind of all I know about Don Quixote, so I'm really interested in giving this one a go. When putting together this list, I seem to have missed out the entirety of the 18th century, because we're next jumping ahead to 1844 and The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This is a story of wrongful imprisonment and escape and revenge and revolution and all of that good stuff. It's a book that is frequently cited as people's favourite book of all time, and I, to my shame, have never actually read it. The fourth one on my list is Barchester Towers by Anthony Trollope. Now, this actually is the second part of a trilogy of stories, but it is a standalone story, and many people recommend this as a very good entry point to Anthony Trollope if you haven't read any of his stuff before, which I haven't. So this, from what I understand, is all about church politics in parochial England in the 19th century. It's supposed to be great on characterization, it's supposed to be funny, it's supposed to have some really interesting human stories and plots. So Anthony Trollope, highly recommended by many people, and this is going to be my first foray into him. Another French translated novel is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. And again, we're into the French Revolution, and this, of course, is the story of the former criminal Jean Valjean, who is relentlessly pursued for many years by the obsessed Inspector Javert. Now, I haven't read Les Miserables, but I have seen multiple adaptations of it, both musical and non-musical. It's obviously a very famous book and something to aspire to read before I'm 50. Next up, from 1869, and the first book from my 10 hardest books that I haven't read list, is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Jesus Christ, these books are all huge. What have I let myself in for? So this got nominated onto the 10 hardest books list based on the sheer size of it and based on the vast number of named Russian characters that you have to try and keep track of. Other than that, it's supposed to be a really riveting page-turning book. So size notwithstanding, I think I'm going to really enjoy getting through this. Next up, we've got another classical giant, and that is Thomas Hardy and Far from the Madding Crowd. I have not read any Thomas Hardy, and there are several of his books I could have chosen from, like this or Tess of the D'Urbervilles or anything like that, and I chose this one because it's the one I already had a copy of. Like I said, I'm prioritizing books I've already got. So from what I understand, this follows a number of characters, including the wealthy and headstrong Bathsheba Everdeen and Gabriel, the young local farmer who is in love with her, and all of that sort of stuff. There's a whole load of things that happen in it. Apparently it's very good. I haven't read any Thomas Hardy, so I'm looking forward to giving this a go. So we finally make it to the 20th century with 1903's Call of the Wild by Jack London. I've read some Jack London before. When I was very young, I read White Fang, but I don't remember it very much, but I thought I'd read something a little bit different this time around. And Call of the Wild is the story of a dog who goes from being a pet or a working dog into the north to basically live out his life in the wilds of Alaska. I don't know much more about it other than that, but Jack London was famous for writing animal stories, all set up around the Great White North. Yeah, so this might be quite a nice palate cleanser in amongst some of those monster books that I've listed already. The 9th classic book I've chosen is A Passage to India by E.M. Forster. I haven't read any E.M. Forster, and again, I could have chosen Howard's End or A Room with a View or any number of other books by him, but I went for the one that I already had a copy of. So this is set during the British Raj in India and is the story of an Indian doctor who is accused of sexually assaulting an English woman and the ramifications for that and how the relationship between the two societies in India then start to clash with each other. Ian Forster's work is supposed to be fantastic. I've obviously seen some films like Howard's End and A Room with a View and things like that, but I don't know much more about A Passage to India, and I'm looking forward to giving his writing a go. And number 10, the second book to make an appearance from my 10 hardest books list, Ulysses by James Joyce. And this is the story of Leopold Bloom and his wife Molly Bloom, and I think another character as well, Daedalus something or other, and about a single day in Dublin, which largely follows the structure of Homer's Odyssey, hence it being called Ulysses. Ulysses being the Roman name for Odysseus. This is the book that got voted by my viewers as the hardest book that people had ever read, and it is notoriously difficult to get into Joyce's writing and gets worse when we get to some of his other stuff. But I have planned to read Dubliners and Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man as a primer to get into the flow of Joyce's writing. I haven't, though, included them in this list, otherwise Joyce would be packing out this list, and yeah, that's a lot of commitment to make. The 11th of my classics is All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Maria Remarque. So this is told from the perspective of a young idealistic German soldier in 1914, and then starts to unfold the horrors of war. This is the original Horrors of War book. It's supposed to be excellent. I've never read it, although there have been multiple adaptations of it. The one I remember watching many years ago is the Kirk Douglas one, which I think was directed by Stanley Kubrick. You'll have to check that out. So like I said, this is the original Horrors of War book. It's supposed to be remarkably moving. Really looking forward to giving this a go. From 1929, this is the third book from my 10 hardest books list that's cropped up, and that is The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. This is the story of the Compson family, who are basically a family in turmoil and starting to implode, and it is written in a multiple perspectives, a lot of stream of consciousness going on in there, and it's supposed to be quite a difficult one to digest. But people who love Faulkner really love Faulkner, as evidenced from the comments on my last video. I've also had a lot of excellent advice as to what other Faulkner books and short stories to read before tackling The Sound and the Fury, which I'm probably going to take. However, this is the only one that I'm having on this list of must-have reads before I'm 50. Another perspective on the Great War is A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. So this is drawn heavily from Hemingway's own experience as an ambulance driver in the First World War, and is a story about all of the comradeship and a story of love and all of that sort of thing, told in Hemingway's usual sparse, austere, but very powerful writing style. I've read a few things by Hemingway before, and I always find his stuff deceptively simple. It seems like there's not an awful lot happening in these stories, but he's got a way of writing them sparsely in a way that really sticks with you and lives in your head. So I'm really interested to see what this one's going to be like. I know I said I wasn't going to focus too much on writers that I'd already read before, but I really want to read At Swim Two Birds by Flann O'Brien. Flann O'Brien is an author who I love. He's not for everyone. It's very surreal. It's very odd, but I love books like The Third Policeman, The Dalkey Archive, and The Poor Mouth. At Swim Two Birds is one of the few books of his that I haven't read. It's supposed to be a bit of sort of metafiction. It's about a student growing up in Dublin, and we also go into the stories that the student is writing about all at the same time. And as this is Flann O'Brien, I'm expecting it to be pretty weird but pretty funny. I'm looking forward to this one. Next up is another book from my list of top 10 hardest books, and as hardest books goes, I think this is the final boss. It's Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, the only author who gets 2 books on this list because he had 2 books on the top 10 hardest books. So Finnegan's Wake is about... I don't know. There's a whole lot of stuff going on in Finnegan's Wake. The best I can make out is that this is telling the story of multiple people's dreams, and it flits from one person's dream to another, and it has to do with this innkeeper and his wife and possibly daughter, and they're dreaming about ancient Irish legends, and there is a death and an actual wake, but this is all to do with the folk song Finnegan's Wake rather than an actual, I don't know. I mean, go and look at my top 10 hardest videos and listen to that first paragraph that I read out. And if you are any the wiser, then by all means, let me know. Next up on my classics list is Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. I know this is really, really petty, but I kind of hate books that the cover is to advertise a TV program or a film. If there's ever a tie-in adaptation book, I try and avoid them like the plague, but this is the copy of Brideshead Revisited that I have, that I stole from my dad's library. So it's the one I've got with young Jeremy Irons looking out at me. I hate this cover. So Brideshead Revisited is the story of Charles Ryder and his recollections about the relationships that he had with the flight family of the stately home Brideshead, and over the course of the years in the interwar period, the various times he visited them there and the relationships they had. It's supposed to be excellent. I don't know anything about it other than that, so I'm really looking forward to giving it a go, even if I hate this cover. As time's going on, I'm feeling more and more like my statement about prioritizing authors that I haven't read before is less and less true, as illustrated by next, which is East of Eden by John Steinbeck, because I have read Steinbeck before. I have read Of Mice and Men, I've read The Grapes of Wrath, I've read Cannery Row, and I really, really like Steinbeck, but this is supposed to be his masterpiece, and I haven't read it, so it feels like it's an appropriate one to add to the list. This is the story set in California of basically over several generations of two families, the Trasks and the Hamiltons, and the relationships with themselves and each other. So it's supposed to be an amazing book. Grapes of Wrath is my favourite Steinbeck so far, so it'll be interesting to see if this can surpass it. And the final book in my classics section is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Written in 1952, this is the story of an unnamed black protagonist in the US navigating the society of the time, and his life and how he is perceived by himself to be invisible to society. I think. I don't know. I haven't read it. It's supposed to be a really, really powerful and important book, and well worth a read. The next section is what I'm broadly referring to as modern literary fiction, and first up in that we have got Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon, yet another one of the books from my top 10 hardest books that I haven't read. This is a novel that is set in 1944 in London in the closing years of the Second World War, and there's a whole lot to do with the development of the V2 rocket and all sorts of strange things happening around that as well. It is supposed to be very good, and I am looking forward to giving it a go, but as many people told me they DNF'd this as read it when discussing it in the 10 most difficult list. Another piece of very odd sounding fiction that's come very highly recommended from people I trust is If on a Winter's Night a Traveller by Italo Calvino. From what I gather about this book, it is about a story within a story about buying the book If on a Winter's Night and a Traveller and finding that it has been printed incorrectly, so you take it back to swap it for another copy of it and then get an entirely different book and then try to track that. It's very, very odd. It's supposed to be really, really original, and I'm really quite looking forward to trying this one out. Next up, we've got another from my 10 hardest books list, and that is Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. So this is the winner of the best of the Booker Prize winners. So of all of the 40 Booker Prize winners, this is the one that came out on top. I'm not certain how much of a recommendation that is, because I've read some Booker Prize winners. Story of a young man who's born in the stroke of midnight on the day when India is become independent from Britain, and his growth in his life has parallels with the history of India. Magical realism, all sorts of weirdness. Supposed to be very good. I tried it a few years ago. I didn't get very far into it, but I'm really willing to give it another go. Next up is Money by Martin Amis. There is a huge Martin Amis sized hole in my reading. I have not read any of his stuff at all, or his son Kingsley Amis either. This one is Money is not the full title of it. It's got one of those titles that YouTube doesn't like very much. I'm just going to show that to you. And this is the story of 1980s excess, as far as I can gather. It's about an entrepreneur who jet sets all over the world and flits away his money on everything he can possibly do to excess. I don't know what it's like. We'll see. It's supposed to be very funny. It's supposed to be very good. And then this might be another gateway into an author that I haven't read before, but becomes one who I'm going to read a lot more of. Next up is a book that, if you've spent any time on BookTube over the last few years, despite this being written in 1986, this is one of the real darlings of BookTube, and that is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. This is a Pulitzer Prize winning novel. As far as I know, it's Stephen King's favorite book, and it is the favorite book of many, many other people here on BookTube as well, and I have not read it. I have not read many Westerns. The ones I have read, I've enjoyed, and this is supposed to be a fantastic story. It's the story of two Texas Rangers who go on a cattle drive in Montana, and it is the story of their friendship, their relationships, and just them in general. It's supposed to be excellent. Everybody loves this book, and I haven't read it. Next, we've got another one of those 10 difficult books I've committed to read, and that is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. I've read a fair bit of Cormac McCarthy before, so I've read his Border trilogy, All the Pretty Horses, The Crossing, City on the Plains. I've read No Country for Old Men, and I've read The Road, and I've enjoyed all of them. Blood Meridian is supposed to be one of his more difficult books, both from subject matter and the violence that's in it, and also the sparseness of his language means that you really have to pay attention to what's going on. It has had a significant amount of people commenting about how good it is. It's also had a significant amount of people saying that they just couldn't take it and couldn't get through it. It's set in the sort of Texas-Mexico border in, I think, either the late part of the 19th century or early part of the 20th century. And it's about a young man who falls in with this group of, I suppose you could call them bounty hunters, who are paid for the scalps of the Native Americans that they bring back. I'm looking forward to giving this one a go. I do like Cormac McCarthy stuff. So yeah, even if this wasn't on the top 10 difficult books that I committed to read, Blood Meridian would probably be on this list. And speaking of the difficult list, we've got Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. Possibly the biggest book here, which in a list that contains War and Peace and The Count of Monte Cristo and Les Miserables, that's quite the achievement. So this is set in a kind of a near future world, but where the world has become hyper consumerized, and you know, the years, instead of being numbers now, are named after their corporate sponsors, and it's about tennis and all sorts of weird shenanigans, and a film called Infinite Jest, which people get addicted to. It's about addiction and tennis and all sorts of weirdness. A good chunk of the book is made up of footnotes and appendices and things that you have to refer to. So David Foster Wallace apparently takes great joy in making you flick backwards and forwards from the appendices into the main narrative of the book. It's the people who love it really love it. It's been described as the Gen X Ulysses. As both a Gen Xer and an Irishman, I'm not certain how much of a recommendation that is, but it'll be quite the achievement if I can get through this one. So as predicted, this has been a long one, so I'm going to stop it there at the halfway mark. So to quickly recap, those first 25 books were The Monkey King, Journey to the West by Wu Chenyen, Don Quixote by Cervantes, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, Barchester Towers by Anthony Trollope, Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy, Call of the Wild by Jack London, Ulysses by James Joyce, A Passage to India by E.M. Forster, All Quiet on the Western Front by Eric Marie Remarque, Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner, Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway, At Swim Two Birds by Flann O'Brien, Finnegan's Wake, also by James Joyce, Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh, East of Eden by John Steinbeck, Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon, If on a Winter's Night a Traveller by Italo Calvino, Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie, Money by Martin Amis, Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, and Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. I'm going to finish off the modern literary fiction and then start to look at some of the genre fiction like the sci-fi, the horror, the fantasy, the mystery and thriller, and also some of the non-fiction books that are on my 50 books to read before I'm 50. Anyway, what did you think of the ones that I've done so far? Is there any surprises on there? Is there any that I've left out that you would like to read before you get to a significant age? Let me know down in the comments and I'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, thanks a million for watching this. Really appreciate you taking the time to do that, and take care.